Dionysius will say, I don't quite comprehend. Be clear and not so clever, right? Euripides says, all right, I'll try again. If we mistrust those citizens, and again, translating out of the Greek is sometimes hard here, the irony and the comedy, the satire that's going on. If we mistrust those citizens of ours whom now we trust, and those employ whom now we don't employ, the city will be saved. If on our present tack we fail, we surely shall find salvation in the opposite course. Right? And Dionysius says, whoa, what? Just give me practical advice, or give us. You can hear Aristophanes, give us practical advice. Aeschylus will in fact give the practical advice, and finally Pluto will come back and say, now, then decide. Dionysius says, I will, and thus I'll do it. I'll choose the man in whom my soul delights. Euripides says, oh, collect the gods by whom you swore you'd take me home again and choose your friends. In other words, Euripides says, all right. He's almost like you imagine him getting up and saying, hey, all right, Aeschylus, I'll see you later. Thanks for the conversation, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to be the one that gets taken back to save the city. And Dionysius says, 'twas my tongue that swore, my choice is, and you can kind of hear the audience kind of going, although, of course, by this point, everybody pretty much knows that this is kind of a joke of an actual competition. I choose Aeschylus. Euripides says, what? What have you done? Done? Dionysius said, given the victor's prize to Aeschylus. Why not? Euripides says, do you dare look in my face after that shameful deed? Dionysius says, what's shameful if the audience thinks not so? And we're told that during this play, there would be clapping, right? The audience is expected to kind of engage with the actors, and at this point, probably the audience is going to begin to celebrate the selection of Aeschylus, right? Look in my face, Dionysius says, what's shameful if the audience think not so? Euripides says, have you no heart, wretch? Would you leave me dead? In other words, you had the chance to bring me back to life and you didn't do it. You could resurrect me and take me back. You just died, remember. Euripides had just died. Dionysius says, who knows if death be life and life be death? Quoting back some lines from Euripides himself. And breath be mutton broth and sleep a sheep's skin. And then you will have Pluto says, now Dionysius, come ye in. Well, let's have a meal. Okay. You made your decision. Let's have a meal. Leaving the chorus. Now, I haven't talked a lot about the chorus in this play, but leaving the chorus with some of the last lines. And this is the lines. And I want you to hear the sarcasm that just drips, the irony that just drips from these lines for Aristophanes as he writes for the chorus to say, blessed the man who possesses a keen, intelligent mind. You can tell that the chorus is going to be very happy that Aeschylus was the winner as opposed to Euripides. This full often we find. He, the bard of renown, now to earth reascends, goes a joy to his town, goes a joy to his friend, just because he possesses a keen, intelligent mind. Right it is and befitting, not by Socrates, sitting, idle talk to pursue, stripping tragedy art of all things noble and true. Truly the mind to school, fine drawn quibbles to seek, fine set phrases to speak, is but the part of a fool. In other words, notice here Socrates being mentioned by name. Thankfully, the right selection was made. Aeschylus is the right selection. Why? Because he represents all that's old. Euripides, why was he bad? Because he represents, like Socrates, the degenerate element. That element that will ruin Athens. You can already see here that it will be, in fact, the setup that here in 5 years will explain why the city was ready to get rid of Socrates. He, like Euripides, is bad for us. Pluto says, farewell then, Aeschylus, great and wise. Go, save our state by the maxims rare of thy noble thought, and the fools chastise, for many a fool dwells there. This is Aristophanes. Again, he's just literally saying there's a lot of idiots in Athens and they need help. Aeschylus, you need to be the one that goes and help them, because obviously Euripides, he can't do it. He can't do the job. Finishing then as the play culminates with Aeschylus, he says, I take the missive. And then he says, this chair of mine, meanwhile, because he's getting up to leave his chair of first prize poet, who's he going to leave it to? Meanwhile, he says, I leave it to Sophocles here, for I count him next in our craft divine, till I come once more by thy side to sit. But as for that rascally scoundrel, Euripides there, That low buffoon, that worker of ill, oh, let him not sit in my vacant chair, not even against his will. And you can kind of see, of course, Euripides kind of in the corner now pouting. And the chorus is given the final words of this play. First, as the poet triumphant is passing away to the light, grant him success on his journey, a different kind of odyssey than Odysseus took. Ye powers that are ruling below, grant that he find for the city, this is the role of the artist for Aristophanes, good counsels to guide her right. So we at last shall be freed from the anguish, this sounds so much like Plato's Republic, freed from the anguish, the fear and the woe, freed from the onsets of war. Again, many arguing that Aristophanes is one of the greatest of the pacifist writers, right? Well, this is how the play ends, and it's a wonderful, wonderful tragedy, or comedy. I hope that you have the chance to pick it up and read it on your own if you haven't already done so. Let's jump now to level 2 and 3 quickly. At level 2A, well, of course, poets are important, but they're also dangerous. So put that in your notes, right? The role of the poet, to save the city. If what the poet is doing is not positive, is not building up the good of the city, got to get rid of it. This sounds, of course, very similar to what Plato will say through Socrates in the Republic. Remember, even in that text, right, you have critiques against certain kinds of music and stuff like that because it doesn't lead to the upbuilding of the community. Bad poets are dangerous because they are degenerative. They destroy the inner workings of the community. This is, again, a very conservative argument for Aristophanes. Notice as well in this play, you seem to have a message. The gods can be mocked, right? You can make fun of them. And heroes can be mocked, like Hercules. But they're important still, right? Because they show us the way. So notice Aristophanes in the end is going to take Dionysius and make fun of him at the beginning. But by the end of the play, Dionysius has made the right choice. The choice that the community is going to applaud. At level 2B, well, we said we were going to play the game of the symbols. Of course, the scales come to mind immediately. We're playing that game against Milton's, for example, Paradise Lost comes to mind, the scales of justice and all of that. Only now we're kind of weighting poetry the way we weigh cheese. But there is an interesting counter side to that that says, you know, this is some serious business in the decision about what is good art, what is bad art. What is good for the state, what is bad for the state. Of course, through the history of the West, we have encountered this debate over and over again, haven't we? Should poets write and artists write and movie makers make movies just simply for themselves or for the good of a community, right? The conflict, of course, here is central. The old is better than the new. And Aristophanes clearly was worried about plays like the Bacchae, right? And Euripides' play, Hippolytus, right? And he's going to say as much in this play. At level 3A, well, we've said it already, let's review it. It's an interesting line from Aristophanes to Chaucer. Go back to my comments on Chaucer and the importance of what Chaucer is doing as that great iconoclastic voice who is speaking. He has an agenda. Remember those lectures? He has an agenda, Chaucer does. He is speaking against those institutions that he finds now to have serious problems. What's his problem with the church? Too much hypocrisy. So what does he do? Well, he writes up the Pardoner's prologue and tale, right? As we've said in those lectures. From Chaucer, of course, it's an easy step to find our way to Pope and to Swift. What do we say about Swift in his Modest Proposal? What do we say about Pope in, for example, Rape of the Lock or Essay on Man? Again, we're playing the same game. A pretty harsh critique of society. And then finally, we get to Beckett and the Waiting for Godot text that we've talked about before. And again, we mentioned Tom Stoppart's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. This is significance at 3A, that we're pointing out that Aristophanes is such an important contributor to, finally, today, things like Saturday Night Live, which is really an influential text, many have argued, for example, in the history of American politics, certainly in the last few decades, right? What is for you, a level 3A question, what is for you your favorite mock text, right? Maybe it's Monty Python, Holy Grail, or Life of Brian, or whatever. Political satire, what for you moves you? Do you like, for example, the political satire of Saturday Night Live? Is it true that maybe it did help, for example, President Obama win the presidency because it demeaned or made fun of certain of President Obama's antagonists on the political right? This is interesting stuff, right? At level 3B, how about this question? Do you think it's okay to make fun of serious serious ideas, serious stuff. Do you think that's okay? Or do you rather think that it's kind of dangerous, right? Family Guy comes to mind. Obviously, anytime we ask this question, as we talked about in our Chaucer discussion, Family Guy comes to mind, right? They'll take anything that's kind of sacred and they'll kind of make fun of it. Do you think that's okay? Or do you rather kind of agree with Aristophanes? That's kind of dangerous, because pretty soon, if you make fun of sacred stuff, nothing can be understood as sacred. Everything's kind of a joke. Everything's kind of funny. Do you think that's okay, right? We think about Kurt Vonnegut, don't we, in his Slaughterhouse-Five as a classic example as well of satire that's at times really funny, but other times it's very, very disturbing, that classic pacifist novel, as we've talked about it. And then finally, this question: how do you decide, personally, again, right, 3B, your own self personally, how do you decide what is the best music, the best movies, the best of anything, cuisine, whatever? How do you make those decisions? Because there obviously has to be a standard. You get in your friend's car, and the friend turns on a song, and you say, turn that off, that's garbage. On what grounds do you decide that it's garbage? Is it just simply what you like or do not like, of course, but what makes you decide what you like or do not like? And then go back to our comments on from Yeats's Sailing to Byzantium, caught in that sensual music, all neglect, young people neglect, monuments of an aging intellect. What is a monument of an aging intellect? Right? How do we decide that? What in 200 years will they still be listening to, watching from your time period, those monuments of an aging intellect? Is it the best stuff that survives? Right? Or no? To use the word picture from Francis Bacon, it's like a river. The really important heavy stuff sinks to the bottom. The fluff stuff, it floats along the top, and yet that's usually what is seen. Right? Is that the case? Well, I feel like we've looked at some monuments of an aging intellect, to borrow Yeats's line, right, from Sailing to Byzantium, in this volume number 8. I hope that you appreciate this study of the 8 tragedies and the 1 comedy, and I hope that it will lead you to study and want to know more about Greek drama and the ways in which Greek drama, of course, prepared us for, yes, no question, Shakespeare, and then, of course, yes, no question, in the 20th century, our study of Arthur Miller, for example. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed this study.